My name is Bonnie B, and you are watching The Power of Perseverance. So today's conversation is it is so exciting for me. We're going to be able to talk about these ketones and around migraines and what they're doing for the brain. And I have Dr. Elena here with me, and they have a company called KetoSwiss out in Switzerland. And you guys have been working on ketones for quite a long time, and the research behind the brain and migraines. And so my first question to start off this conversation is, what brought you to even acknowledge the power of what a ketone could do?
Bonnie, thank you so much for having me. It's a very personal story, actually, for me, how I got so excited about this. I actually have been a migraine sufferer for now 2 decades, and I really believed in traditional classical medicine. So I went to my GP, and he didn't know what it was, and then eventually I got referred to a neurologist, and I got the diagnosis of migraine eventually, but it only ever got worse. And I tried all pharmaceutical interventions, all drugs, antidepressants, anticonvulsants, anything on the alternative side like acupuncture and various supplements, and it only ever got worse. So by the time I was halfway through my bachelor's degree in psychology, I realized I was never going to be able to do a normal job anyway, because my migraines at the time were about 20 days per month. So in debilitating pain, you can only take painkillers on about 10 days a month. And you're just not functioning at all, right? And you're super unreliable because you cannot predict when these migraines are coming. And 10 days out of the month, I was basically stuck in a dark room trying to survive, really.
And nobody had any answers for you. Nobody could, and nothing was alleviating. Not pain meant nothing.
Nothing was. What was really helping still was the strong painkiller drugs like the triptans. They were giving me some relief so that I could like sleep for a while or do some studying for a while, but then it would always come back. So there was no real root cause treatment, just painkiller solutions. And so I figured eventually, well, maybe I can at least try and understand better what migraines are, because nobody could even tell me why they're happening, what are they, and maybe within my lifespan figure out what to do about them. And so I switched for my master's degree. I was very lucky. I got a scholarship to switch into neuroscience and try and understand the brain better. And it was very fascinating, but also there, migraines were not on the agenda, even though it's 1 billion people out there that have them. And also interestingly, nothing was really about brain metabolism. So when you study neuroscience, it's more about how the neurons connect, how do they talk to each other, what are ion channels, how does neuronal function work and not work. But nobody talked about how do these neurons actually get energy, how does energy get into the brain. So it's very interesting. And just really working on my second master's thesis, procrastinating in the library, I stumbled across a Nature magazine. Nature is one of the most renowned scientific journals out there, and it had a special on epilepsy in there. And epilepsy and migraines are genetically related, or migraine actually as a disease. And I already knew that at the time, and I was reading upon the oldest treatment for epilepsy, which is a fasting mimicking diet. So basically you imitate fasting state by eating predominantly fat and then moderate amounts of protein and a little bit of carbohydrates only. And that's this fasting mimicking diet in the meantime is known as a ketogenic diet because it leads to your liver producing those ketone bodies, which are small chain fatty acids that can actually feed the brain instead of glucose. And I was reading upon the mechanisms. I was like, oh my God, this was like this epiphany moment, this like biggest aha moment, I think, in my life thus far, because all the mechanisms made sense. And I already had a patient back then that I studied during neuroimaging. She had come back, chronic migraine, like literally you can see these people, they do look sick. They almost crawl into the lab. They're constantly in pain. She was really bad. The scanner broke down, so she had to come back 2 weeks later. And that lady walks in and she's like beaming and walking upright. And I was like, who's that patient? I don't even recognize her anymore, right? And she told me, I was like, what did she do? And she said, oh, I've been fasting for 2 weeks and I've had red wine every night and I didn't have a single migraine attack. I was like, how's that possible? Her brain is starving. My theory at the time already was that migraine is a warning signal when your brain is running out of energy, right? Now she had,
and we relate energy to glucose predominantly.
Exactly. And even at Oxford, I studied, my neuroscience degree was from Oxford. they taught us that the brain is basically reliant on glucose for its energy demands, right? And then there was like, oh, but glucose, you're fasting, there's no glucose. How is that possible? And sitting in that library, reading that epilepsy special, I realized that energy is not energy. I mean, not all energy is created equal. So you can
No.
basically eat all the time if you eat the wrong things. For example, if you're obese, you are eating, but you're starving at the same time. Your brain can starve while you have an excess of calories because you cannot use the fuel source that you're giving your brain adequately. For example, a bit like you are feeding a diesel engine petrol all the time. It will never work to its full potential. And this was the realization that, okay, this woman had been fasting, but her brain had been fed for the first time. And
Oh my
just
gosh.
to just to even support that theory, unfortunately for patients that came for the scanning, we always had some biscuits as a thank you after. So we gave her cookies, and the same night she had like the worst attack, she wrote me. So we made these people sick without knowing it, right? So at the time, I had no idea how to help these people. Fast forward 10 or so years, I think now I have at least a better understanding on how migraines, or at least a large subgroup of migraine, is as much a metabolic disease as it is a neurological disease. And why is that so beautiful? Well, we cannot do much about our neurological hardwiring today. We cannot really change neuronal connections or even our genetics to date, but we can, to a very large extent, we can fix metabolism. And that is what I then tried after. So you asked, how did I get to ketones? I then started out on like a strict ketogenic diet. At the time, there's no information. So it was overdoing protein. It was really hard. It was making me so much worse at the beginning. Eventually, I did get into ketosis, I think, also with the fasting. And eventually, my migraine got a lot better. But at the same time, my liver had been struggling with medication overuse for a long time. So I think it was struggling with making ketones and a strict ketogenic diet. It was just stressful for my body. So I wasn't feeling at my best. And at the time I thought, well, maybe there must be a way to do this differently, that we still get some of the benefit without doing this so strictly as a diet. And I love fruit and like colorful vegetables and all that stuff. So this is when we first thought about, is there an exogenous way? Is there a different way that we produce the ketones in the lab? And we do not have our liver, which is always struggling doing that. And this is when I then just Googled, I was a nobody. I was not even having a master's degree at the time, or maybe just finishing my master's. Dominic D'Agostino might ring a bell to some. I reached out to him, and Patrick Arnold, a friend of him, he was like the first person, I think, to ever make these ketone bodies in the lab. And I got the first products from him. This is where it all started, as like one of the first people. And then through them, Dominic D'Agostino became my external supervisor. I then moved to Switzerland, because Oxford said it's way too risky to look at ketones and migraine. There's no research. We have no idea if this works. You can do a neuroimaging project with us as you planned, but if you want to research ketosis and migraine, not here.
And then so you couldn't do it like in the U.S. You had to go outside of the country to be open-minded.
I had to go to Switzerland, and this tiny place in Switzerland said, well, if you ditch the other offers, you can come here and do it as a pilot. And so I ended up in this tiny country, Switzerland, which is beautiful, by the way. And got also, after a lot of trial and error, got a grant to the first clinical trial, actually, the first randomized controlled trial using exogenous ketones in a patient population. That was done in Basel, Switzerland. And the last thing to the story is now we have filed a patent that is now also granted worldwide on the use of ketones in migraine. So with the first data, I then went to Novartis and Roche and like all these big pharma companies and was like, look, this seems to be working now. Can you do something about it and bring this to patients? And they're kind of all laughing at me. It was way too early stage, and it was an endogenous, like a human identical molecule, not like a new small drug molecule and all that. So it was it was clear they will not do anything about this. And at this stage, I was like, well, I'm only a researcher. What am I going to do? And I was in a little, they call it a biotech leadership camp organized by Novartis, where we played a little bit biotech case study. And when we won this challenge with our team, I realized, okay, maybe the business part of things can be learned somehow. And this is when I then founded KetoSwiss to bring this eventually to patients like me. Now, five years down the line, we now have a finished product called MigraKet. It's a medical food that is designed to optimize metabolism in migraine. It has those ketone bodies in it, right? That, the exogenous ketones, the D-beta hydroxybutyrate, the human identical form, as well as 30 other micronutrients, antioxidants, vitamins that are known to protect mitochondria or help the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cells, to make energy from the ketone bodies, like a one-stop mitochondrial function shop for migraine, basically. And that is
Oh my
launching
gosh.
in December, finally. So that was a
That is
long.
launching in December. So as we're having this conversation, those listening, if you go to keto.swiss, .com,
Yeah,
you're going to
that is
go ahead.
that's the headquarter company. So don't go there. Go
Oh,
to
don't go there.
migrakeet.com
Go
or
to what?
plannincontrol.com. Migrakeet.com, which is migra,
Migrate.
like migraine, and then
Okay.
keto, like keto.com. There you can even pre-order eventually. You have all the information on the product. The keto.swiss, that's more the headquarter company. So that is if you want to learn about KetoSwiss in general and where we're going, that will be there. But anything related to the product and the launch, the upcoming launch in the US, would be on migrakeet.com. Thank you for
Wow. No, we've got so much more to go into. I wish we had like more than 5 hours. I mean, seriously. So because you knew something was better out there for you, you just felt that, listen, I'm going to be on these medications. These are a band-aid. This is not the root cause. Your desire to seek something not only better for you, but more natural for your body because you cared about, one, longevity and the quality of substances going into your body. So now you go on which is a pathway. A ketogenic diet is a pathway into ketosis, and ketosis is a way for your body to produce ketones, which let's be really honest here, our society is conditioned to think that glucose is the best. Evidence is showing it truly is not. We have highly, highly processed, modified GMO carbohydrates. You go outside of the country, there's just not the chemicals in other food that there is in our food, and it is closing our minds and it's causing these reactions, and then people are surprised they're having all of these problems, but they're not owning the responsibility of what they're putting in their body. You took ownership, you took responsibility, you said, I'm going to make this happen for me, and I love that. So we know the brain is an organ. It's one of the most powerful organs in our body. It's the central nervous system that runs our entire body. How crucial is that? Like you said, you have a high octane fuel. If your brain is that important, just like an engine to one of these vehicles, why wouldn't you be giving it optimum performance?
Yeah, so that's also something that I only learned after the whole experience. I guess I'm in the way a bit lucky that I have the pain and I had the desperation. I needed to do something. And I also kind of had a bit of the background to actually be empowered to help myself, right? Not everyone is in that lucky situation. And sometimes you don't know where to get the adequate information, right? If you just Google things these days, there's so much
So
inadequate
much.
information out there. How, as like a patient or a lay person, are you going to filtering out what is the bullshit from the actual real information? That's also where I'm really trying to be an advocate on social media and elsewhere, as just my Dr. Elena Gross channel, where I try to sort or explain the science in a way that lay people can understand and they don't fall trap into the things where they into the information where they say glucose is what you need and it's essential or whatever. But coming back to why the brain is the most important organ. I mean, I'm biased. I'm a neuroscientist, so definitely.
Well, it kind of it runs our life if you think about it.
It makes us who
Subconsciously,
we
it's
are.
yes.
Yes. No matter, whenever you think, move, this is changing your brain. Your brain orchestrates everything in the body, right? Even your heartbeat. It starts and ends with the brain. It just does. Now, interestingly, the brain is also a very unique organ in the sense that it's very protected from the rest of the body. It has the blood-brain barrier going around it. You might have heard of it. That basically only lets a very few selected small molecules into the brain. This means, from an energy perspective, that only glucose, ketone bodies, and lactate are actually getting in there to adequately fuel the brain. Now, on a modern Western diet, we're mostly stuck with glucose because we're not exercising a lot, and we also don't have the ketones being produced or ingesting them anymore, which from an engineering perspective, you are left with a single fuel supply. And that is also, anything that is only a single source is always very vulnerable, right? The other thing that makes the brain very vulnerable is that it cannot actually store energy much. And you see that with a stroke. Couple of minutes at the latest, your cells are dying. Your brain does not store energy, so it's completely dependent on the rest of the body to supply it with adequate energy at all times. In addition, the brain, whether you sleep, you rest, you think, you exercise, the brain only makes up 2% of the body's mass, so it's very small, but it constantly needs 20 to 25% of your energy. So it's very energy hungry. It cannot store energy, and it can only let a few molecules into the brain to fuel it. So that makes it perfect for an energy disaster and an energy crisis in this organ, which means we need to take care of our energy metabolism so that our brain can perform at its best. And with migraine, I always say a migraine is a bit like a Ferrari, but with an inadequate fuel tank. So if you don't give a high performance brain, or a brain that is active all the time, enough fuel, it won't think very fast, right? And we all know this, if we're tired in the afternoon, or at the worst case of the spectrum, you get epileptic attacks or you get migraines. Your migraine is forcing you to rest until energy homeostasis has been restored. So it's forcing you to lie down, withdraw. Really, the migraine is protecting you. The migraine is not the enemy, right? It's the protector.
It's a signaling source saying, hey, something's not okay in my brain.
Exactly.
And from what I'm hearing you understand is when people have these migraines and they take other things, they're really band-aiding that pain to not feel it, instead of being curious to say, why am I feeling this pain? Where is it coming from? And then what I'm hearing you also say is it's a brain's inflammatory response to not getting what it's seeking, which is essentially a ketone.
Yes, it's essentially, it's energy, and the ketone is just a cleaner supply of energy, right? So when you are a migraine patient, or this doesn't even have to be migraine, actually a lot of neuropsychiatric diseases even, right? They have, one of their core symptoms is that they do have this malfunctioning powerhouses, these malfunctioning mitochondria, and an energy deficiency in the brain. Depression, Alzheimer, a lot of other neuropsychiatric diseases come with that, and that also increases inflammation and oxidative stress. Now, the beauty of ketone bodies is that they can, independent of what your core mechanisms are, they have so many different metabolic and signaling actions that can address this problem. For example, they're anti-inflammatory. They reduce oxidative stress. They're potent antioxidants that catch these free radicals, but also when you burn them, less free radicals are produced. They're inducing mitochondrial biogenesis so that more of these powerhouses are being built. And important for epilepsy and migraine is also they reduce hyperexcitability in the brain so that your neurons are less likely to fire, which also, again, conserves energy. So there's many beautiful things around these ketone bodies. One of them being more metabolic is also they produce more ATP per oxygen molecule being burned, so they can be considered a bit more of a more efficient energy molecule. That being said, you cannot survive without glucose. Your brain needs 30 to 40% of glucose all the time. It always needs to be around. But the idea that 100% of energy needs to come from glucose, that's just completely outdated. And that's wrong. And there's even some research, neuroimaging research, to suggest that the brain may actually, and the heart, brain and heart may actually prefer ketone bodies over glucose for a certain percentage when given a choice, which is a great information if you consider taking ketone bodies exogenously. Because I get that question a lot, but what happens if I still have glucose around? Well, you always have glucose around. It's not an either or, it's always an and. Ketone bodies.
It's just not having as high as an amount and having to diet to get there. But now that we have been able to bioidentical something in our body to support, due to the lack of nutrient and support we have in our diet as a society, based on our level of understanding, really.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, as you were in development with this, what really was the difference that you saw? Did you, with the esters and the salts, because you use primarily salts in your product. That is what you've done it on. Yeah. Is there a misunderstanding there about why people think esters are better when really a salt is our efficacious?
No, this is a great question. And I have to be a little bit careful about not demonizing anyone here. But, from a medical perspective, Of course, we have to be careful about ingesting too many minerals. There's always a
Correct.
too much. So keeping that in
Yes.
mind, the salts, if it's D-beta-hydroxybutyrate salts, if it's the human identical version, it's literally, in addition to the minerals, it is the molecules that the body would be producing. With an ester, it's an artificial molecule, and a lot of the ester molecules now have something as a backbone that's called butanediol. Butanediol has a ketone body bound to it in one form of the most common ketoester, and that together gives you the ester bond. Problem is 50% of this molecule is actually an alcohol. It's an alcohol that is ketogenic, as in it will be converted into a ketone body. It's still an alcohol. So I think in the long run, there's at least cases from medical doctors describing this, that it's actually pretty harsh on the liver, especially in a patient if you're ingesting that on a daily basis, because you will be using up the enzymes that are needed to neutralize the alcohol. Now, I would never give one of those existing ketone esters to a patient. That said, we actually have in development a ketoester. Ketoester just means you esterify ketone bodies to something else. We're developing a ketoester that does not have an alcohol as a backbone. I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, unless you also go through all the safety trials and you show that it's no issue. With any novel molecule, from my perspective as a patient or a medical researcher, I think we have to show safety first, and also safety not if you take it for a week or two, but what happens if you take this for months on end? What happens to your liver enzymes? What are the splicing? What is it spliced into? What are the splicing byproducts? With the beauty of the salts is we know 100% this is separate into the mineral salts and into the D-beta-hydroxybutyrate. Those are molecules that the body is seeing all the time. If you're fasting, whatever.
And they're essential. You need them.
And that means you have the machinery to use them. We just need to be careful that we don't overuse the salts. But this is why we opt for the salt solution or the free acids potentially in the future. That just means no mineral salts to it. But the D-beta-hydroxybutyrate molecule, because we know those are the ones that the liver will be producing or is producing to a small level in any case, if you're fasting or if you're just alive.
No, I love that explanation. It's like I kind of think of it as like the salts would be butter. They're from an authentic source. Our body, it's recognized from, and the ester is more of like margarine. It's kind of artificial, made up. I would prefer butter over margarine. Margarine's not is a bad thing, but if you had to pick, you'd want a salt over an ester just due to how it processes in your body. So makes complete sense.
You could even say that the ketone bodies are actually like mother's milk or body fat in that sense, because it's identical to what the body would actually be making. Now, a butter is still from a cow, not from a human.
Right, right.
This would be like, our own body fat or the mother's milk from a human mother. And then esters would be more like whatever, a margarine, yeah.
Yeah, something like, what I also found really interesting as I was browsing around the work that you guys do, and it was so cool, is I didn't think about how ketones affect us at the DNA level. Like, I mean, they've been shown that when they bind to the histone, am I saying that correctly? Histone proteins around which our genetic code is wrapped. This is a way for the ketones to alter the structure of the DNA, which is so crucial because that empowers us to be able to change things we were born with that were passed down from generation and allowing us to reprogram that in a sense and giving us a better quality of life. That's how I understood it.
So I think it's important to say they're not changing our DNA code, but they're changing how the DNA and what part of the DNA is read. So this is important. It's a bit like, let's think about the DNA as an IKEA manual for furniture, okay?
Okay.
So I might have a 3-legged table and you might have the DNA, the building plan for a 4-legged table, right? So I will only always make a 3-legged table because I don't have the manual for something else. But now, whether or not I'm building tables at all in my body depends on whether these manual pages are stuck together or not. So ketone bodies can determine how much of these tables or chairs or whatever manual pages we have in our DNA, what is read and what isn't read. And this is fantastic because this gives us a chance. This is literally how our environment, and the ketone bodies now belong to the environment, how our environment is changing, which of our genes are actually read and which proteins and things are built and which are not. So, for example, if your manual page, your pages for building a table are stuck together, your body's restaurants will not have any tables. Now, how are you going to eat food without tables? That is terrible. Now, this could
Right.
be, for example, if you are on a very high glucose diet, your body could lose the manual for building tables, and you would always have to eat. Your body would have to eat from the floor. Now, if you introduce ketones, that can change this histone acylation. It's a hard word for me to say in English, but the way that these epigenetics that are called, the epigenetics are how your genes are read. You can change the manual pages how much stuck they are together. So now, for example, you could be building your personal tables again, and that can be great. And for example, for with ketone bodies, it's a lot about antioxidants. How many antioxidant enzymes are you building to protect yourself from these free radicals, which are aging you and can predispose you to more diseases, right? So yes, ketone bodies are signaling molecules, and that just means they're a bit hormone-like. They can also change your epigenetics, a bit like exercise can, or your sleeping pattern, or what you're eating. All of these things can change your gene expression, which means you're not a prisoner per se by your genetic code. So which IKEA manual you're born into the world with will not determine your fate in that sense.
You know what I've noticed about people that keep a lower carbohydrate diet? And when I say carbohydrates, I'm referring to, all of them, right? Potatoes, fruits, vegetables, processed everything, because it still is a carbohydrate. And I see just a balanced diet of healthy, fresh produce and meats. You look younger. You really do. What you eat really affects how you age.
Yeah, that is quite fascinating. I'm a bit worried that my skin is starting to age, and I'm like, oh my god, I should have maybe. Maybe I should be taking more ketones. What's going on? But yeah,
Marquita,
it's a good
we're just going to rub them on
totally.
our face. It's going to be a new facial scrub.
Yes, exactly. Maybe more MCT oil on my
Yeah, FCT, yes.
there's a pretty good you're right, there's a pretty good correlation between how old you look and what your biological age is rather than your chronological age, and what you really want to be young is your biological age, right? That's what matters.
That's really cool. Through all of these things and challenges that you've gone through, this was a period of, I believe you said 15 years in the making.
Yeah, so in the making, I'm 34 years old now. I am getting old, as I said, but
No, that is so young. Oh my goodness. Think
oh
about it. If you live to be like 95, you're not even half there yet.
well, yeah, I better not be. But yeah, no. So I started to get migraines about 2 decades ago. So then, this is when my own journey as a patient started, and like reading about this, but I was still a kid.
Yeah.
Research really into the topic is over a decade now. Yeah. Starting towards the end of my bachelor's degree, beginning of my master's degree. So it's a decade of research on the topic. Yeah.
How has your research been able to change the minds and the conditionings of others around you into seeing the quality of the work and what you've been able to do with it? Those people who doubted you in the beginning, because here's what
Yeah.
I'm finding through these conversations as you persevere, right? The label of my podcast is Power of Perseverance. As you persevered and you had so many people telling you no, or you're wrong, or it's not this, even probably people close to you, I would imagine,
Super. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah,
who
like
doubted
the
you.
hardest was my dad because my dad is also a scientist, and when I start getting these debilitating headaches, it's to be fair, if you've never had it yourself, if you only have had headaches, you don't know what a migraine is, right? So I remember the hardest thing for me was when my dad was like, "Come on, take a painkiller and go to sleep." I mean, what are you whining about? And he literally didn't know that I wasn't just complaining and being a wimpy child, but it was actually tormenting, right? But for me, it was the worst was when I wasn't yet a scientist and I didn't have any credibility, and you don't see migraines, is to make loved ones even understand what I'm going through and that I'm not just being difficult and all the things that come with migraine, that I cannot smell the perfumes, I'm getting sick, like, or these lights are hurting me, even between attacks, or and there's too much sensory input even now with my colleagues, right? In the lab, in the office now, not being they don't wear perfume, but now I can explain everything and help so much. It took me 10 years of feeling sometimes really misunderstood, at least 5 years, until I figured out piece by piece what is migraines. I can really understand. I explain it now. My dad's 100% on my side. He does not wear
Wow.
these like perfumes anymore because he understands I'm not making it up. I can explain what is happening in the brain. I can explain why this is an issue, and I can explain why I am different to what he feels. And just that understanding that we're all different and my reality is maybe something you've never felt, but it's still real, right? So that was a huge thing for me. And then the more and more, um, say, credibility I gathered, distinction from Oxford, even though a lot of the stuff, honestly, most of what I know is self-taught. I did have
Yeah.
amazing mentors, but most of the things I have are self-taught. Just having those titles and having a Nature Neurology publication now opens the door of having the very important people take me seriously, even though migraine is a topic nobody cares about, even though ketone bodies are a very early field that is on the horizon, and it's disease prevention that is also a new thing in pharma. I must say, I mean, what you said, I feel like I would have probably known almost as much without these degrees and these like
Yeah.
credibility stamps, but having them helps me being taken seriously by people that wouldn't take me seriously otherwise, and that's very sad. But that's how the world works. And really going through these like parts of education really helped me to now, I think, eventually be able to make a difference in the field, even at a younger age. Lastly, I want to say I was always thinking I was going to do a career in academia, but being a non-medical doctor in the hospital is already hard. Working on ketones, which nobody works on really, at least in Europe, is hard. Maybe being a female now is an advantage. At the time was also not great. And in academia, it's very much hierarchy. You have to do it for 10, 20 years under a professor, do everything the professor says until you can develop your own projects. Now, having a startup, I'm in a very lucky situation that I can go and raise millions. I mean, I can try, and I can
Yeah.
do the research, of course, not from a university, but I can get research done by a different vehicle that I think is meaningful with partners at universities, funded by investors that are interested in this topic. And it really gives me a way to accelerate this and do this at a much younger age and with much less like whatever titles that you might need otherwise. So it's a bit of hacking the system. And whoever you are, I think there's probably a way, even without these like titles, to hack the system in your world, to empower yourself and empower the ones around you. And now when I look at my Instagram and we get these messages of people saying they've watched it, we've changed their lives, every single one matters.
Wow.
One patient that tells them their life has been reversed, when you get those on a regular basis, it only needs a few patients, people in your life that you convert, that you explain something, that don't have to go through all the pain that you've gone through, and it's already meaningful. So that's the mission. One patient at a time, one important person at a time to change the field forever eventually. I can't do it alone, but Bonnie, you're there, Ricky, are there. There's a lot of similar, like-minded people that are watching this potentially and that think that maybe they cannot do anything, but no, you can.
No,
And
you 100% can. Of
they can.
course.
And
Yes.
it takes 10% of people worldwide to know something or of something, and then that will be common knowledge and go wild. So I don't think we're there yet, but we're getting to it.
We're getting there.
Pay
Well,
attention.
I love what you said about how you knew and you felt something was like you had a feeling, but you couldn't prove it. You had to have all of these titles and the accreditation, which isn't a bad thing, right? Because there's so much fake out there, but you needed that to support. And I understand, I hear you. When I would train for my shows or do things, I would say, I always feel good on a low carb state. I always feel good. I don't feel good in this way. And people would tell me, well, you need this or you need that. Yes, I understand, but how you're telling me I need it doesn't feel good to me. So
Yeah.
I've gone on my own research.
And they
Migraines,
don't take you seriously because they don't feel this way, right? So the
or
whole
you
idea.
don't have your degree, so you don't
Oh,
know what you're
exactly.
talking about. And
Yeah.
and some of these people, I knew more than they did just based off of my personal experience and reading research. I was
Yeah.
self-taught, which I
Exactly.
think is even more empowering because I don't remember who had the saying behind it. It's one of the great philosophers of our time, but said the most powerful education is self-taught education.
And you will just from my experience, being a patient, having no solution, you will put so much thought and so much more effort and so much more energy into something that personally affects you. It's not
Yeah,
like,
you
oh, it's
will.
9 to 5, now I'm done. I'll go think about my life and do something else. No, if this is your issue and you want to be better at what you do and you want to solve your own issues, you will just do way more than somebody else. And so I think self-taught can also be more powerful if you, that's the only if, you need to be able to distinguish the crap from the truth. I think when you're self-taught, this is the biggest hurdle, like looking online, really comparing the different sources and trying to find out what is true and what is not. But once you've learned to master that skill, I think that's one thing, probably one good thing that I learned in Oxford, is really to distinguishing what can I trust and what can I not, and to always question. And
Always
that was a good
question.
thing. Always question. Don't take anything for granted. Always question whatever it is, even if you think this is a common fact. Question it. And that's, I think, one really good thing to take away. And then self taught can be as good from my experience, if not better, than a stale university degree of some sort. But yes, people will not take you seriously if you don't have these credentials, and that's a big flaw in the system still, I guess.
You know
But
what I found interesting too is I've had a headache, hormonally or something. I've had something that I just didn't feel good, but I had never had like a true migraine. And a few months ago, right before I actually reached out to you, I woke up and I was nauseous in the lights. Like it was a full on blown migraine. I literally was like, what do you do? I'm in so much pain. I couldn't get out of bed. I crawled up the stairs
right,
into the
exactly.
kitchen and I
Yeah.
thought, I have nothing to take. How do I get rid of this? Because I thought I've got so much to do. And I'm in a panic mode. And the next thing I thought was, well, because I have ketones everywhere, but because I'd never been in that state of mind and so much pain, I didn't even know how to begin to alleviate it. And the first thing I could think of as well, knowing the work you were doing, I went, all right, I've got ketones. Let's see if this works. I mean, I can't even tell you. I'm laying on the floor. My kids are like, what is wrong with you? The lights are penetrating. I'm in so much pain. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I mean, I've been through pregnancy, like the worst kind of pain. And I went, all right, I'm going to take these ketones. I took about 5 grams and it took about 30 minutes and I didn't feel it gone, but I felt it start to alleviate. And in another 30 minutes, I went, okay, this is working. I'm going to take more. And I took about up to 15 total grams of the ketones. And within 2 hours, it was gone.
Oh my God, that's
It
so
was
great.
gone. And that's when I was like, I'm getting her on the podcast. I totally
Wow.
understand. But without that experience, I would not have understood that perspective. Because in my mind, I
Yes,
mean, I don't think it's not a real thing. I just didn't understand it because I didn't feel it. So after
yes, and
feeling it,
it's
I went,
really
oh my
hard to
gosh.
understand, right? If you've never had it, and it takes a lot of empathy and like trying
Yeah.
to understand, but you probably never will. So you've described this very beautifully, what a migraine feels like. And for me, it's also the problem. A lot of times when you miss the point because you're asleep or something where it
Yeah.
starts. So usually, if I miss the starting point, ketones aren't as effective anymore if I don't also take a painkiller. But what you said, it took you like 2 hours, right, to get out of it without
Yeah.
painkillers. So I usually advise I take some aspirin and ibuprofen with the ketone buddies if it's already full blown. Because otherwise, you can't even think about, you're crawling something like, oh my God, I can't even possibly mix something in water. I can't
No,
think
I didn't even know how I was going to
about
drive to the store. I thought I can't
yeah,
even drive to the store to buy something. And
exactly.
my first thought was pain relief, which is a Band-Aid. It wasn't going to solve my problem. And
Yeah,
that's
but
what
with
those
the
ketones.
ketones, it doesn't come back either. Now, if you only take the painkiller, then after like 8 hours or whatever, it comes back. So that's
Yeah.
really root cause treated. I'm so glad that worked. And I think that was you then. Rob texted me and said, my colleague just wrote me that she took in like a bad migraine attack. She took ketones.
Yeah, no, I did. And I immediately posted it on my Facebook because I hear of people having these experiences and my heart goes out to them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have something. But even better, here's the thing that my heart goes out to. I
Yeah.
have seen what happens when people go on painkillers. Their quality of life, they don't want to live. It affects their families, it affects their children, and it just there's no hope. So I don't see what is so bad about just trying something, because what if it just happens to work for you and it's natural and it can create a better quality of life for you? So I got on my Facebook, I posted about it. I was like, listen, you don't understand. These are like the real deal. And I just hope that people, when we post this podcast, they get nuggets out of this, and it's validation for them to
Yeah.
trust that the years of hard work you've put in has really brought to surface something that can be meaningful and enhance their quality of life.
And unfortunately, it might not work for everybody. It will probably not work for every single migrainer. I just must say that because as a migrainer, you're disappointed a lot of times. So I think a large proportion of migraines are really connected to metabolism, but not all. Some are more hormonal, for example, right? So if it
Yeah.
happens always before your period, then you must fix your hormones. It will
Yeah.
not be purely metabolism, right? So it will not be 100% for everyone.
No, but to that though, I do take them even
No,
more
yes.
during my period, because I do get chronic headache right before the
Yeah.
period, and it doesn't make it go away, but I notice that it's manageable.
Yeah. And it can also help with hormones a little bit, as in like reducing inflammation, which can help a bit.
Yes,
When
no.
will this actually be posted? Are you gonna tell me beforehand?
Yes, I will.
And also share it
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, no, this is going to be I'm excited for this, people to get your products. And um, the last thing I wanted to touch on, through all of the things that you've gone through to be where you are today, when,
Mhm.
and I'm getting goosebumps as I'm about to ask you this question, but
Okay.
you have those days where you doubt yourself and you're questioning the work, and you're just asking yourself, however, if that's, through prayer or meditation, and basically just saying, help me to see the light. Where's the hope at the end of this tunnel, that I'm on the right path? In those moments, was there one thing that you would repeat in your head, or was there a mantra that helped keep you going?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I mean, for me, when I remember the months where I had 30 days, basically nonstop of migraines, and I didn't know where to go with the pain. It was literally ready to jump out of the window. But for me, it was always my loved ones. I was like, I cannot be not there for them, and I cannot do it to them. So for me, when I was thinking I cannot do this any longer, it would be the loved ones in my life that kind of kept me alive in that moment. And then, I mean, throughout my life, I think there was a lot of challenges, but in the end, I have learned there's always a way to figure things out. I very much believe in the universe, kind of, that things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, trust in the universe and I trust in myself that eventually things will get better. And if they're not better yet, it's not the end yet. So it's believe in it will get better. And I have it in my hands also with a lot of things to do things better. So I always believe what is out of your control, accept it. So I try to accept the things that I cannot control, but I try to do everything in my power to do something to change the things that are in my control. And yeah, but sometimes when it doesn't go further and I am in a very bad state, I try to remember the things I've already achieved to make me believe I can achieve whatever hurdle that is currently facing me, even though it looks like it is totally too big of a mountain to climb, that I can, in steps, that I can make it to the top of the mountain, that the universe has my back. Even with the migraines, I think I just believe I got them for a reason, so I can turn the pain into passion and make a difference in the world. That's might sound cheesy. It's a bit like religion, right? If you believe there is a purpose, it helps a lot. So I believe in a purpose, I believe in the universe, and I believe in my own abilities and in my loved ones around me. I think those are the things that are helping me. I don't have a mantra. Maybe I should get a mantra. I don't think I ever had a mantra.
Or, just something that you repeat, right? Like things that come up to surface. But
But then what I do now, if
yeah.
I feel like it's too much work, I cannot do it anymore, there's too many roadblocks and it's terrible, you know what? I can actually thank everybody who's listening to this or who has reached out. I read the messages of the lives that I've touched, and then I feel like it's 100% worth it again. It's worth
Oh,
the
I
fight.
love that.
Beautiful words that people have sent me. I'm just thinking, I'm doing it for you. This is exactly why I'm putting in the energy. And that gives a lot of energy back. So thank you for everybody who's reached out on whatever channel. If it made a difference, I'm very happy, and it's worth for every single one of you.
I love that. What is one tip you would give to somebody who's on their path of discovery?
My number one tip, probably from my experience, is listen to your body and trust yourself. Whatever is, that's the same thing. I was in a hospital situation for a long time, and the medical doctors, how they would make fun over patients. They say this and they say that, but hysteria, it's in their brain, whatever. No. Just because we cannot explain it yet doesn't mean it's not real. If you're
Right.
feeling this way, if your body is telling you this, it's real. And it's time. It took me a long time, but you have to get back in sync and in touch with your body. Your body typically knows once you're off a crappy diet, if you need more salt, if you need a certain antioxidant, you're craving a certain food, or you need more protein, or you need more rest. Honestly, this is the one signal that I kind of
Yeah.
override sometimes, right? Your body will usually tell you if you're tired, and it will tell you if you need to rest. It will tell you if you need more water or more salt, or once you're back in sync with your body, it will probably tell you. So trust yourself, trust in your own abilities, and trust in your body, and start listening again.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing and for being here. And I'm excited to see how your company grows and the many people you keep changing lives for. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. It was a beautiful conversation. I really enjoyed it. And thank you also for your work in spreading the word. Much
Yes,
appreciated.
of course. I'm really, really excited. I think if there's not meaning in the work for me, I won't do it. And I'm not driven to get out of bed every day. And
Exactly.
so to be able to share these stories based off my personal experiences and to start this podcast, it really was about I am meeting and hearing all these incredible conversations. If other people were hearing these conversations, they would understand the work that's being done and not only probably want to be part of it, but might find some benefit from it. And
Yes.
so
The word.
I
I think
think
it takes
that's,
a village to raise a healthy human.
yeah,
Unfortunately, we don't have those villages anymore. So creating communities by the migrant community or the community around
yeah.
what it is that you're building, it's kind of building a village virtually. So
It really
people
is.
become
And
part of the village, and
if
how
somebody had
great.
had your information, what could you have what could they have been saved from, right? The pain of going through something. And so I think by it, my purpose, as I understand it for me and myself, is to be part of this work and to spread the word. And I get this from people, right? Like oh, well, you're a sales girl or you're paid to do this. I'm not paid in certain ways for certain things that I do. I'm paid for other things, but I'm very passionate about the work that I do. And so I went to Rob and I said, listen, I totally understand what you're doing with your company. I can be so much more for you. You're going to put me in sales and I'm going to educate people because that's what sales is. You're educating people to make an empowered decision that's best for them or their company.
Exactly. That's what I used to say as well. Now,
Yeah.
also the problem, I have a startup in the back, right? So now it's always like, oh, but you're now biased. Well, I'm still the same person that I was as a
Yep.
researcher when I was product as well, right? But I'm still believing in the same things, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying anything that I'm not 100% convinced in, or anything that I'm not taking myself for that matter. But yeah, that's how it is. So people have to make their own decisions who to trust and who not. And if somebody says I should not be talking too much about ketones because I'm selling them, fair enough. But I'm still a big believer in at least talking about the science behind whatever we do. And
Well, and if you can be paid for the work that you've done, why wouldn't you want that abundance to come to you? Why be paid for something that's not meaningful? You know, be paid for the work you're passionate about. That is true authenticity. And we lack that in our world. And so I'm so thankful for people like you that bring it. So thank you.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please share it and help us keep the conversation going. We can't grow without you. So thank you in advance for your support of Power of Perseverance.